Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Central Marin Community Wildfire Preparedness Workshop. My name is Rich Shortall, Executive Coordinator of Fire Safe Marin. These workshops are meant to help you build the knowledge, skills, and confidence that we all need to make our families and homes safer from wildfire. The workshops also provide an opportunity for you to ask questions of your local fire agency representatives and get updates on the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority funded wildfire prevention projects in your area. These workshops, in fact, are funded by the MWPA, or the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority, which also sponsors the Curbside Chipper program, which is now underway. We're going to hear more about the Chipper program later, but I urge all of you to go to chipperday.com/Marin and sign up to take advantage of this great opportunity. So let me now introduce my co-hosts for the evening. First, Battalion Chief Todd Lando from the Central Marin Fire Department. Todd, you want to come on board? Same thing with you, Larry, so that you can tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Rich and Fire Safe Marin, for hosting this workshop. I'll apologize in advance if my internet connection is spotty. I'm connected through a satellite internet connection from the North Fork of the Flathead River in Glacier National Park.
Great. Thanks, Todd. And Larry Pasero, who is the Deputy Fire Marshal for the Kentfield Fire Department. Larry, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, and thanks for having us. It's a great opportunity to reach out to everybody in our community. I think it's been a good beginning to our season so far, and I'm happy to be here, and I look forward to answering some questions and sharing with you some of the developments we have this year with our program.
Great. Well, it's really wonderful to have both of you here tonight. So for the public, the workshop is divided into several segments that are broken up by videos. After each video, we will ask the co-host for some comments about the video, and then we'll take some questions from the audience. We strongly encourage all you to participate by providing questions in writing through the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. Those questions that we can't get to tonight will also be answered and posted live, not live, we'll post on the Fire Safe Marin website. We do ask you to keep your questions related to tonight's topics. Tonight's presentation will be recorded and available on the Fire Safe Marin YouTube channel, which includes many additional wildfire educational videos. So our first video tonight features Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority Executive Officer Mark Brown describing the events that took place at the recent glass fire in Sonoma. Mark's home is in the area and he was on scene during the fire. There's really quite a bit we can learn from his post-fire analysis.
Being a resident of the Skyhawk subdivision and being recently retired from the Marin County Fire Department and the new executive officer for the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority, I thought this was just too good of an example for us to miss. September 27th, that's the right date, right? The glass fire started in the early morning, 3:30, 4 a.m., something like that. And I'm looking at where it is on the map. I'm going, all right, shouldn't have a tremendous impact for me. Should run in, if it crosses the valley, it should run into the Nuns Fire and some of the other fires for 2017. But I think it's far enough south, it's not going to impact me. So if you saw in a presentation, you might have thought, well, that was a funny first picture you put in there, where kind of a dark picture with a little lantern. That's a timestamp. And to give some context to how fast these situations can come about. That's about when I'm hearing sirens. Pull out my phone and I look at the location and I'm like going, that's the absolute worst spot for this subdivision for a fire to start. When I first pull it into the command post, it's 9:15. Finally get situated where I can stand side by side with the incident commander. And as I'm standing next to him, he goes, all right, you're at about 300 to 500 acres. And it's going to be in Santa Rosa in 2 hours. The fire was actually progressing down that slope slowly, and I was actually really happy with the way it was progressing. You go to the next slide, which is the timestamp of 0048. You'll see trees flapping in the wind. It's those trees right there that are flapping in the wind. And again, listen to the wind and look at the change of wind direction. And that's the fire becoming well established in this drainage and making a hard run down this drainage. And this is a high school friend of mine's house. And that's why we have permission to go onto his property. Every time I walk by his house, I'm going, well, Sean, you got privacy, but I'm not sure that's the best thing for you. So when I got down here, the bottom of this brambly rose bush had just gotten going. I squirted it for a little while, got it out, and then you can see not just that corner, but that upper corner of that bush started burning. You see this carcass of a rose bush. You look at the trees, to Todd's point, right, Todd? The trees were damaged by everything else that was burning. The trees really didn't transmit the fire. It was the ember cast that was, in my opinion, coming off of this, getting blown against. And you see that there used to be a gazebo, and then what is Chris? There were some type of vines on the gazebo.
Looks like it could be dry and not a lot of leaves. I'm not sure what it is.
I can't remember for sure, but one thing that bothers me, and it could be after the fact, but the lowest burn is over here.
Propane. Probably fueled by the vines that came into the apple tree and eventually got the propane tank going, but the propane was probably low torture this way.
And it may or may not have been after the house got well involved. But it was, to me, whether it was that piece there, and you see the little architectural feature that creates a chimney type effect, but it was the flammable material that was up against the home, and then the wind pushing the embers from this up against the house and then forcing it up into the attic vents. And so the whole idea of blocked eaves, Vulcan vents, no blocked eaves, no Vulcan vents on this home. And it burned from the attic down. I guarantee you, I watched it. You know, for many of the homes that were destroyed, I really believe that if people had done their home hardening and zone 0 defensible space work, those homes would have survived. If they didn't have flammable material within the 3 to 5 feet of space of their home, if they would have blocked their eaves or they had improved vents so that the fire could not get in their attic, I firmly believe they would have survived this fire. So the newer homes were built to 7A standards. And yes, there was suppression action taken on that deck fire up there. But look at the beating that the side of that house took, and it didn't get into the attic. I have to think that there was building code 7A standards helped save that home besides suppression action. But virtually, from what I see, every one of them burned from the attic down. And then, Paul, if you want to talk about what you and I were talking about, please.
Different wood chips really reacted much different than we would have expected. There's a wood chip that has a red dye. That wood chip is what you find at that house that's got the heavy damage to it. It literally consumed every single wood chip between fence line to fence line to fence line. And then immediately next to it, taking the heat that it did, we had that cedar chip, and it didn't do anything. We had multiple yards where the cedar did fantastic. And then just downhill from the red dye chip was the gorilla hair, and we talked to some of those crews, and it took them hours to try and pull apart, you know, six inches to a foot of mulch to fully extinguish it.
This is where I have one of the first pictures from May of 2019 that when I was on one of my walks, and so that first picture is of these two houses, right? Not too much has changed since that picture minus the fire. And what looked like was the primary carrier fire up that slope?
Fence.
The fence. The fence, right? And it's somewhat hard to tell exactly what caused the fence to get going. It looks to me that the gorilla hair allowed the fence to get going. If there had been nothing flammable up against that fence, it's unlikely the embers hitting that fence would have got the fence going. It needed something to maintain the heat underneath the fence. And then once the fence got going, it maintained its own combustion and walked up the hillside, and looks like someone went in and kicked a few panels out. It's looking this way. You can see the handrails of a walking path. So you have that beige house. There's a gap in homes that's purposeful. It's an open space. Walking path that comes down, and then the remnants of a house is just on the other side of the gap. So if you look at those pictures, you'll see the second house in had remarkable defensible space work in their property and in the area of the easement below them. And then when you look at the fourth house in, what do you notice in that picture? The house with the remnants of trees below it.
Continuous canopy.
A continuous canopy, and when we get up top and look at it from up there, you'll be shocked how close some of those trees were to the house. It created two different types of ladders as well. Not a ladder up the slope, but also a ladder from the ground into the trees. I think the house with the trees was probably the first house that started.
When were your pictures taken?
What was likely underneath those trees that singed those trees and allowed the fire to slowly creep up that property?
I think mulch, I think a great example is the second tree up, like the deciduous tree up there. It has that nice little ring around it. At least looks like it from here.
Put some mulch around there to help with the erosion, help hold water, so that the trees could have moisture to grow. You'll see the batch of several homes that were destroyed. And in these, to me, these two homes that weren't destroyed. And then we have a home where you see the roof timber still sticking up, and then a home completely on the ground. And it struck me, why is there that gap? And I think when we get up to, you might be able to see why that gap, or why did the new home get involved up there instead of house to house against the wind? What's that, Chris?
That one was surrounded by Italian cypress.
Wait till you see it up top. Of the skeletons of Italian cypress immediately upwind from the structure. And like I will bet a paycheck that that's what burned that house down. The before picture, blackberry and bramble that was virtually impenetrable. And then let's look at this house. I mean, as D-Space evaluators and you're looking at this house, what are you saying to yourself?
I would say that those are deciduous trees that didn't ever get involved in the fire, and they browned out because of what was on the ground underneath them. Yeah. So clearance shouldn't mean removing those trees. They probably provided some protection to the house. Limbing them up and cutting this grass that was underneath them right here is what would have made a difference.
I think you're right. Yeah. But trees not being the total enemy is an important message. When we go to this last house up here, you'll see that the trees were damaged because the house burned down. It wasn't the trees that burned down the house. That house we've talked about, the other way around. But the vast majority of the trees, it wasn't the trees were damaged because of the house. If we just do a good job of having separation and not creating that ladder fuel, then we'll be successful. And you see that house right there, that deck caught on fire. And it's probably because the bramble that was in here, that bramble that was holding fire, finally started to carry up the slope. They probably had some stuff that allowed that deck to get going underneath. It took some significant suppression actions to save that home. And they were just lucky that there were fire engines already in this area. Take a look at the fence in between. So whether it was the deck that got the fence going and the fence walked this way, probably what happened, right? But it could have easily been the deck that got the fence gets going over here and then gets into the eaves in another spot. I think that's one of the most important messages we have to drive home. How we're going to keep our communities safer is if we focus from the house and work out from there. And if we make our home in such a way that embers can land on or around the home and our home does not become ignited, then not only is your home saved, but homes downwind from your home are saved.
All right, Todd and Larry, we're all back on again. For those of you who just joined us, welcome. Everybody has seen many photos of the aftermath of the terrible fires we've had over the last number of years in the North Bay and as far up as Paradise and whatnot. And what we always see is this massive destruction. And it's kind of hard to tell what happened. Why did the home burn down? What's really unique about this, and where I think Mark Brown just did a fantastic job, is here we have a situation where we can see, why did this home burn? Why did several of them right next to him? Why were they saved? What was the difference? It's so much more apparent. And what you see there, Mark spent hours on this. This is just some clips from it. It was just an amazing walkthrough and such a lesson learned. Todd was there. And Todd and Larry, what are some of the takeaways from what we saw there?
I think we continue to see year after year some real common factors in these losses that we're seeing in neighborhoods. And obviously our fires are changing, our environment is changing. Our ability to understand how fire affects homes, specifically with Ember broadcast, and really focusing on that zone zero approach to reduce and remove fuel right up against the house. I think, we've been experiencing tremendous fire behavior in the last 5 to 7 years, and a lot of that has been pretty close to home. Many of us have been a part of the Wine Country fires and the fires throughout Napa and Sonoma last year. There's one common thread in all of those fires is that we're losing homes in a sequence, and that sequence of events is reflective of ladder fuels, and it starts with dry grasses, it starts with small fuels, it starts with mulches that become receptive ember beds where we're collecting embers and starting small fires. But then the next step is that growth into those medium fuels where we're getting into shrubs and smaller diameter bushes, that 1 to 2, 3 foot range that are allowing tremendous heat generation up underneath eaves. We're seeing hot smoke, combustion, and embers entering into the home where we're actually burning homes from the inside out. And I think a major part of our program this year, as we continue to try to educate and get people involved and to understand the fire problem, is that this neighborhood and many of the neighborhoods we've seen on the news are much like the neighborhoods we have throughout Central Marin. It's a very easy parallel to draw when you look at some of the topography, when you look at some of the vegetation. I think we're kind of conditioned to think that this can't happen in our neighborhood, but we have very receptive fuels in our geographical location that can experience some of the same fire conditions that we're dealing with or seeing at some of these other big fires.
Great, thanks, Larry. Todd?
I think it's important for residents in Marin to really keep in mind that the answers you're looking for to protect yourself, they are not black and white. And in many ways, they've changed in the last decade. Just to emphasize what Larry said, we've learned a lot in the last 5 years. The amount of data that we've collected from tragically losing 50,000 homes in California and Oregon, and over 200 lives lost in these fires. It's a lot to process. It's happened in a short period of time. And the lessons that have come out from this are really valuable. So even if you think something about maintaining defensible space, about what it might mean to harden your home, it's important to really focus on the new information that FireSafe Marin's publishing in cooperation with all the Marin fire agencies and the MWPA, and really take a second look at things. In that video, there was a section where they're talking about mulches. It's a question that comes up all the time, and we've learned a lot just in the last 5 years about how mulches are reacting to fires because we've had so many fires that have impacted communities like this. So here was a great example of a product that 5 years ago we may have recommended to you, and now we know more about it. And it turns out that these red dyed mulches, when we look at them, how they perform in a real fire scenario in somebody's backyard, that it was clear that the dyed mulch product didn't perform as well as the other. So it just, pick apart a lot of what you saw in that video. There's good information, and it may be new information that could really help you.
Great, thanks, Todd. Just a few things for everybody to keep in mind that we saw there, because we're going to dig in a lot deeper on some of these things. So the role of mulches, the role of fences, which we saw, it's just a fence. Yeah, except till it burns up next to your home. The decks which have been exposed and not properly protected, areas where we've had ornamental growth right next to the home on arbors and whatnot. What was the impact of that? Some of the really vulnerable, there's no other way to put it, but hazardous species are out there, like Italian cypress and whatnot. So we're going to get into all that stuff, but you saw each one of those was a contributor to an individual house burning when so many other ones didn't. And then the last great one, there was a really good example where on a hillside slope there were some homes that just had really good defensible space, no problems, and some you could see in before and after did not have good defensible space, made them really vulnerable. One other thing kind of related to that, around the same time that fire was happening last year, we had our own first fairly large fire in Marin and Wild, the Woodward fire out there. And it was amazing in our webinars and whatnot, the attendance just shot through the roof. So for both of you in your professional lives, having a fire that brought a lot of smoke to the area that was actually live in Marin County, how did that affect people's interest in becoming prepared?
I think it's anytime that we have these large scale events, and obviously the Woodward being the closest one to home, but just up the road, up 101 in Santa Rosa, the whole Sonoma Napa complex. It certainly is engaging people to understand that this is a real hazard that we have in our community. I think we're somewhat polarized as a community in that we see the worst of what things are in the news. Unfortunately, we don't broadcast a lot of what the beginning of these fires looks like. We can't see the net results of small prescriptive changes to small fuel beds and doing some home hardening and really pulling some of that fuel volume away from the home, breaking some of those connections with fences and other architectural features from homes. I think right now it's really a great time to experience those lessons learned and figure out how we can apply that to our built environment and really learn from some of those lessons and apply those changes that are going to have a large impact on how we become resilient to fire.
Great. All right, so let's move on. Todd, did you have something you want to add there? Sorry.
Oh, I just, if I were to add one thing, it's just Marin is incredibly engaged. I think a lot of Northern California is right now. And I'm happy to say that for the last 5 years, I've seen continuous engagement from the community year round. People, obviously, their interest is peaked when there are fires burning nearby, but we aren't seeing a drop off in questions and interest in effort work being done in the community, even during the winter.
Oh, that's good. That's a real positive and a plus for Marin. So when we talk about a lot of things that hardening home and defensible space and et cetera that we'll get into, I think to understand where these recommendations are coming from, we really need to understand the science of wildfire. So let's take a look at a video that walks us through that and then how we need to adapt to that reality.
Good evening. My name is Mark Brown. As Rich mentioned, I have the honor to serve as the Deputy Fire Chief for the Marin County Fire Department. And as I was thinking about how to best describe to everybody what or how we got to today's fire environment, it dawned on me that we really have three failures that are disguised as successes. The first one is our total fire suppression policies that we adopted way back in 1910. And California ecology needs fire to be healthy, and we've interrupted that cycle. And so we've created unhealthy forests. We've tried to let those fires burn at times if they were lightning caused fires and they were in a location where it was safe for them to burn. But if there's a structure threat or a life threat, then we have to go and suppress that fire, which furthers the problem. The next success that is really a failure is the success of pushing people further and further into the wildland, living in the wildland urban interface. And quite honestly, where there are people, there are ignitions. When there's ignitions, we're gonna have fire. And where there are people, we have to suppress that fire. So therefore, we're continuing the damage to our forests. And then we get to the most important failure, or a series of some successes, and that is creating our industry, creating our transportation, and our power generation. All of these successes of humankind have they've been a failure to the environment and through the increase of carbon emissions and what they have done to add to our climate change. And just to give it really succinctly, in California, our fire season has increased by about 75 days a year. So that's more than 2 months a year that we have increased fire season. And therefore, we obviously have more opportunity for fire, but almost as important as that is that the fuels, the vegetation out there just doesn't have the time to recover, doesn't have time to bring in that moisture, and it doesn't have that time to be healthy. So we've created this really vicious cycle. And, as a fire service, we were almost staying ahead of the explosive nature of this new fire environment. Starting in 2013 and a few fires before that, we started to really tip that scale over to where we're not keeping up anymore.
Wildfires are a natural event. A long time ago in California, wildfires were often started by lightning, igniting dry leaves and underbrush in the forests. There were lots of wildfires, but they weren't very destructive because there wasn't as much fuel to burn on the forest floor. Regular fires do the hard cleanup work for us. Native Americans understood that forests were healthier if they experienced lots of small fires, which burned dead wood and debris on the forest floor. They would even set fires to encourage this healthy cycle. This helped large trees stay healthy, made it easier for the native people to hunt and grow food. For the last 100 years or so, we've been putting out wildfires because we were worried that fires were dangerous to people. At first, fighting fires was easy because the forests were clean from years of natural fires. But over time, our forests have suffered. When small fires are not allowed to burn, dead wood and other flammable debris builds up. Now when fires start, they become much bigger and spread fast because the fire has a lot of dry material to burn. Here are two diagrams to describe fires. The first is called the fire triangle. It shows that we need heat, fuel, and oxygen for any fire to burn. The second is called the wildfire triangle. A wildfire needs three special things: fuel that can burn, weather, which is dry and windy, and topography. Topography means the shape of the land. Remember that heat rises, so fires usually go uphill much faster than they go downhill. When it's windy, the wind is stronger at the top of mountains and in the valleys between mountains. So the wind often spreads fires up hills and through valleys. The wind not only forces heat and flames in front of it, but it also sends embers long distances. Embers are small burning materials like leaves and small pieces of wood that can be blown in the wind and smoke. When these embers fall back to the ground, they can start many small fires, called spot fires. When an ember lands near your home, it can start a fire in grass that hasn't been cut, in bushes that have lots of dry, dead leaves and twigs, or on wooden furniture and cushions that have been left outside, or in leaves that are on your roof, in your rain gutters, or on the ground around your house. The embers can also enter homes through open doors and windows, or through the vents that are needed around your home for foundations and attics. Embers are the main causes of houses burning during a wildfire. As climate change warms our planet, wildfire conditions are getting worse. Over time, the average yearly temperature is higher and climbing. Changing climate also affects weather patterns. We're experiencing longer periods without rain, and many trees are dying due to drought. Our fire season is now 2 months longer than when your parents were kids. Many parts of our landscaping are drying out, and this makes the trees and bushes more likely to burn. When we have more strong wind days, all we need is a spark and a wildfire can start, which is hard to put out. Understanding wildfires helps us to live with a natural part of our ecology. We need them to keep our forests in balance, but we also need to understand fire's behavior to know how to protect ourselves and our homes.
The title of this presentation is Community Fire Destruction During Extreme Wildfires, a Home Ignition Problem. Well, so perhaps you say a home ignition problem? Well, duh, we wouldn't be having this if homes didn't ignite. But what if we could prevent homes from igniting and our communities from burning to destruction? So for right now, with our mind's eye, let's visualize our perception of how extreme wildfires ignite homes in communities. So wildfires are inevitable, and thus extreme wildfires are inevitable. And so does this mean that wildland urban fire disasters are inevitable? And my answer to that is no. But you might be surprised based on your perception of how homes ignite during extreme wildfires. So what is the general perception of how homes die. Well, here are 3 interview perceptions of home destruction during wildfires. The firestorm descended like a dragon from hell on the foothill neighborhoods and laid them to waste. The wildfire swept through the community with a tsunami of flame. The wildfire literally exploded houses in flames, leaving in its path. It was like a war zone. But when we look at the evidence of the disasters, when we go and examine the evidence of the disasters, the typical pattern of destruction is total home destruction with unconsumed vegetation. So what this scene indicates is that no walls of flame sweeping through communities occur, and wildfires don't literally or figuratively explode houses in flames. So wildfire spreads as a sequence of ignitions, not as a sweeping mass of flame, even in this kind of behavior that we call crown fires in shrubs and trees. So when we see a scene like this, the high-intensity crown fire burning from right to left stops at the first residential street of this neighborhood, just from 40 feet of gap between the canopies at this street. So even without the crown fire, total home destruction occurs on the left side, initiated by burning embers from that extreme fire behavior. So what do unconsumed vegetation in homes adjacent to total destruction indicate? While not spread through the community like a lava flow, flash flood, or tsunami that explodes houses in flame, leaving total destruction in its wake. And very importantly, this kind of total destruction surrounded by green does not indicate high intensity wildfire exposure. So where we have a choice, if we define wildland urban fire as a home ignition problem, we can focus on making our homes ignition resistant during extreme wildfires and prevent ignitions. So preventing ignition and burning within this 5-foot zone next to building materials is a very critical element. But note in this photo, in this scene, that it was the pine needles that burned, not the shrubbery that was over the pine needles, because it's there unconsumed, scorched but unconsumed. And we see a similar scene of where this house ignited and was successfully protected with the same kind of non-combusted, non-consumed shrubs with the pine needles carrying the fire and igniting from lofted burning embers. So we need to create a non-ignition zone within 5 feet of a home and its flammable attachments to prevent this kind of damage and potential total destruction.
It's important to understand that in fire adaptive communities, the public understands certain components. They understand that there's a role that fire will play on the surrounding landscape. They understand that fire authorities cannot save all homes. They may not be able to. And lastly, that the community mitigation actions will reduce the unwanted impacts of wildfire. In a fire adaptive community, the public also is going to take action. They're going to support and enhance local fire protection capacity, what the firefighters can do, and then what they can do through Ready, Set, Go. They can prepare structures for wildfire via either being firewise or living with fire or similar principles. They need to take action to build fire-resistant materials and use low-risk landscapes. They also need to increase and maintain risk reduction efforts over time. This is the holistic approach that the community needs to take under a fire adaptive community model. The community takes a variety of integrative actions specific to their community. So as you can see, there are many different steps that a community can take, and not every community is going to take the same step.
Okay, we're back again. So quite a few things to unpack in that sequence of videos there. I think Mark did a good job of explaining sort of the history of how we got here, global warming, not putting out the fires, etc. Todd illustrated really well a point that we're just going to hammer home all night, and that is the role of embers. If there's one takeaway, you'll probably be sick of it. It's the role of embers in wildfire, but it really is important to understand that matters a lot. The next speaker was Jack Cohen. And for those of you who don't know who he is, Jack is really more or less the godfather of modern wildfire science. And I think his statement is really interesting. I'd like to hear what Todd and Larry say about it. But he basically said that we don't have a wildfire problem, we have a home ignition problem. What do you guys think about that?
I think it's right on the money. Go ahead, Todd.
Yeah, exactly. It's a concept that's really hard for people to wrap their heads around. That wildfire is part of this environment in Northern California, where I am here. Our environments in the Western U.S. depend on wildfires. We have to learn to live with them, and the problem is that our homes are igniting. And the answer is right in front of us. We have homes surviving.
So we may lose Todd off and on here because he's obviously broadcasting remotely. So maybe we'll turn over to Larry till Todd can rejoin there.
Yeah, I think along the lines of where Todd was headed was, this is from a house out problem that we're seeing. And then we're seeing that our large diameter, large volume trees are pretty receptible based on our California landscape, and specifically our Marin landscape, to endure a certain amount of fire. And I think that one picture that showed the street buffer between the oncoming fire and then the ember broadcast actually burning down those homes, I think it really illustrated the resiliency of some of those larger fuel models. What we're finding through all these studies and our scientific research that's being completed, and Jack does a great job of illustrating it, is that ember broadcast and really igniting those fuel beds right up against in zone 0, that 0 to 5 feet up against the house, creates all sorts of problems. And it's our smallest fuels. I think, we consistently go out and we work with people to identify ways that they can, make changes or incrementally improve their resiliency. And a lot of times it's that heartburn over mulches and small plants right up against the house that we get a lot of pushback from. I think Mark did a great job of illustrating how we got here. But one of the things that I think we don't always talk about is, our love of our green environment that surrounds our homes in Marin. It's, something that probably started in the 50s and 60s with Better Homes and Gardens, this idea of what makes a great landscape. And that was putting a bush underneath every window. It means, kind of having this elaborate landscape that really is contributing to our fire problem, not only because of the age of some of this material, but the density of this material, because all of us that have green thumbs like to build up as much vegetation, and vegetation to us is fuel. And as pretty as it is, as irrigated as it is, if we don't do something to reduce that fuel in that 0 to 5 foot area, we really are putting a lot of heat up against our homes. And even with the best building practices, it still creates problems.
Great. Thanks, Larry. Good points. Todd, did you want to add more? You got to caught up towards the end there.
No, Larry got it for me. Thank you.
Good. So part of what Larry's talking about is this concept of adapting to fire. Wildfire's here. It's not going to go away on some levels. There's no magic to that. I was talking with somebody about this concept, and they go, well, if you move to Lake Tahoe, you sort of need to adapt to living with snow, right? That's part of the experience. If you're going to live in Marin, you have to adapt to wildfire. So this concept of fire adapted communities, it's something that we really think is important. Larry, is that being embraced in your neck of the woods there, Kentfield and so forth?
I think it is. We've, with the help of Fire Safe Marin, we've really done a great job of focusing the educational values and the messages we're trying to push out through the Fire Safe Marin website, and also through our face-to-face contacts that we have through the MWPA and our Defensible Space inspection program. I think we have kind of three kind of people right now: the people that have done it, the people that want to do it, and the people that are polarized and are really struggling with how they achieve some of this stuff. And we continue to try to build on that educational model of understanding how fires work. I did an inspection today with a homeowner. They requested I came out because they're having some insurance issues, and we're still getting some pushback and some confusion about this zone 0 and what it means to reduce fuel and really take small incremental steps to create resiliency in the form of mulches, fuel reduction, horizontal spacing, and lowering the impact of that receptive fuel bed that's going to create the heat right up against the house.
Great. Todd? So there. So go ahead, Todd.
No, nothing really to add. The emphasis on zone 0 is critical, and that's one of those big areas where there's a gap in understanding. It's been difficult for people to wrap their head around the importance of that. I think absolutely the fire adapted community concept is being absorbed. We're starting to see that concept really grow out in our community. The MWPA, I think, is going to be the big instigator of this concept. The fact that we're going to be able to make investments that we've never been able to make before to help create and foster the fire adapted community is really critical.
Yeah, I think the best thing about the concept is that sometimes I speak to people and they throw up their hands. It's like, I can't do anything about this. But you've seen from all this wildfire science, we can, in fact, adapt to wildfire. Defensible space, home hardening, these things go a long ways to letting homes survive. So we don't need to be discouraged. We just need to take some action, and we can adapt to the situation.
If I could add one thing, Rich, it's, I think it's somewhat in our wheelhouse, and it's easier to affect the physical changes to our built environment than it is the mental changes to what our expectations are for our neighborhoods, our own properties. What we see is siloing from neighbors and wanting to provide privacy. I think that's going to be, a major focus of Todd and myself is really educating people to the reasons why we're asking them to mentally change what is the right kind of landscape, what looks good. And that's something that we've built up over, decades. It's going to be a little bit hard to unwind that, but that's a major goal of ours. I think the physical changes will come. We have good support. We have good opportunities to create these prescriptive changes to our built environment. I think really our focus and goal is getting people to mentally get on board with what those changes will look like.
Wow, that's really well put. That's a challenge we find here at Fire Safe Marin. So we're all working together to help move all of us in that direction. That's a really good thought. So let's move on to defensible space. Very important.
I want to illustrate it and bring it to the practical level for homeowners, give you some tips, some ideas of what you can look for and how you can make changes around your home. The first 5 feet is really illustrated right here. We're talking about the surface, the ground, the area right around the outside walls of your house. And we've got a lot of information on home hardening. We've got information on defensible space, landscaping, plant selection. All of these things tie together. They're all important. None of them stand alone. But I really think that we've learned that this zone 0, this first 5 feet, is the most critical place for you to pay attention to. And what I like is that it's also the easiest place for homeowners to take action. So recap here. Most homes are going to ignite from embers. I'm going to show you a couple images that will help you understand what we're talking about when we refer to embers. This is video from a police officer's dashboard cam during the campfire in 2018. You can see the intensity, the number of embers. These are embers blowing across a road. Presumably there are homes in that vicinity. This is a fantastic illustration of what those embers can do, in this case in the forest or grasslands around a community. Again, this is the campfire. These are embers falling from the sky. And look back down when he swings the camera back down. Look what's happened in the few seconds since they turned the camera to the sky. These are spot fires that have ignited in fine grasses, fine vegetation fuels. And frankly, the same thing was happening in the front yards and around the surfaces around homes in that same vicinity. Here's another image, those embers, when they land on surfaces around a home, when they land on the combustible materials around the outside of the home, and your bark mulch, for example, Those materials where it will ignite, leaving green trees in the vicinity of this home. This is research that I think Steve was intimately involved in, but it's one of the best illustrations. This is a home that IBHS built in a laboratory setting. The right-hand side of the home is built with ignition-resistant materials. The left-hand side, not so much. The left-hand side used a bark mulch within 5 feet of the structure. The right-hand side used a decorative gravel mulch, and you can see the dramatic difference in the resistance to the embers that are being blown at this building. This is just, the best illustration you're going to see of what we're talking about. This translates directly into the real world. This is a photograph. I apologize that it's blurry. It's the best copy I've been able to find of this picture, but this is a firefighter trying to protect a home during the Woolsey fire in 2018, burning on the same day that the campfire was burning in Northern California. This was in Southern California. And you can see exactly where the embers are accumulating, and you can see that it's the bark mulch around the exterior of this stucco home that has ignited, giving this firefighter a real run for his money. This is where we tie the home itself, the home hardening work that we want you all to do with zone 0 in this area around the exterior of the house. That's 6 inches closest to the ground. The separation between the ground, and in this case, you can even see leaf litter on the ground, and the combustible wood shingle siding. That's the critical 6 inches. Our goal is to keep the fire from spreading from the ground to the structure itself, and creating that separation. In this case, it's 6 inches of exposed foundation that separates the place where the embers will accumulate and the siding itself. Very important. This is an example image from a home in Marin County. This is a home, I apologize that I'm not backed up farther in the image, but what you see here is non-combustible siding. This is hardy shingles with an ember and fire resistant vent, a Vulcan brand vent, and a concrete pathway around the exterior of the house. You're going to see more images from this in a second. So those things tie together that the structure, or separate the structure from zone 0. And as we've already covered, mulch, your choice in mulch within 5 feet of the structure is absolutely critical. This is an image of a gorilla hair, shredded redwood or shredded cedar type mulch, very commonly used. It's has its purpose in certain situations, but this material does not belong adjacent to your house. What we want to see for homeowners, and this is a simple change that you can make around your structure, we want to see you choose rock or gravel mulch. We want to see non-combustible, non-organic materials used as mulch immediately adjacent to the home. Wood chips or bark are out. They have their place in your yard more than 5 feet from your structure. Shredded redwood needs to be applied very carefully. It's the easiest to ignite. I always point out that that's what the Cub Scouts use to start their campfires. So you want to be very judicious with its use around your home if you live in the wildland-urban interface. Here's an image. This is from the Tubbs fire in Santa Rosa in 2017. This is a home, bark mulch. You can see one of the homes is actually burning in the background, the other is destroyed, and you can see how easily the bark mulch around the outside of the house has ignited. We're talking myth busting tonight, defensible space. That vegetation absolutely needs to go. There's no doubt about it. That's a poor choice in vegetation, but that's not all that defensible space is. The choice in vegetation is one small aspect of creating defensible space. Defensible space is not just about the plants. It's about the design. It's about the way you maintain that landscape. It's about the features that you build into your landscape, the permanent features, not just the plants. This is a great photograph just 2 years ago at the Kincaid fire in Sonoma County, showing very clearly how a landscaping feature, in this case a retaining wall, is helping direct heat away from the house. We hear from people all the time that defensible space, creating defensible space, improving their landscaping is gonna ruin their landscaping. They don't want to see the change in their landscaping. One of the best examples we've seen of a transformation in a yard. Here's the before photo. Here's the after photo. Same photo, same angle. The issues that this homeowner were confronted with were an old wooden staircase that was attached to the house, several inches of bark mulch, a bamboo hedge towards the back of the house and along the side of the house, a dead tree in the yard, and frankly, some areas that weren't landscaped, weren't particularly attractive, which changed to this: attractive use of succulents, use of decorative gravel within 5 feet of the structure. Again, we're not asking anybody to clear all of the vegetation in their yard, but we want people to know that a defensible space, again, not just about the landscaping or the vegetation in your yard, the landscaping features, the other features, the combustible materials in your yard can have just as big an impact on whether your home's going to survive. In this case, a fence. We've talked at length about the importance of protecting fences, making sure that fences are not attached to your structure. This is a great example of a yard that has fantastic defensible space in most senses, but that fence carried the fire directly to the home. This is probably the big one, the mother of all myths. My neighbor's tree is an extreme fire hazard. I have an inbox full of messages that say just that. People write to us, they call us, they're concerned about their neighbor's tree, oftentimes concerned about their own trees. We want people to look down, not necessarily up, when they're thinking about their defensible space. This is a photograph of the Scripps Ranch community in Southern California. This is a neighborhood that was surrounded by eucalyptus trees. Every home had trees in their side yard, their front yard, and their backyard, and every tree survived. None of the homes survived. This gets to the point we make often, that your homes are most vulnerable to embers. The defensible space is not harmful to the environment, although there is a myth floating around that creating defensible space creates harm to animals, plants, insects, and the landscape. This is not the case. You can have a healthy native landscape that's lush, well-maintained, and fire resilient. Myth: defensible space means cutting down trees. This is not the case. Again, we're not talking about the trees when we talk about defensible space, at least not the canopies of them. We want you to look towards the ground. We want you to look at the space around those trees. We want you to maintain a healthy natural forest around your property. This is a community that was losing their native oak woodlands to invasive species like French broom, Scotch broom, and acacia. By restoring the meadow that normally had surrounded these oak trees, they're restoring the health of the native oak forest, and they're improving their fire resiliency. The myth is defensible space means my house fend itself. The defensible and defensible space refers to firefighters. Defensible space as a concept goes back decades, and it really goes back to creating a space that's safe for firefighters to operate. It creates a space around a home where firefighters can protect the home, the firefighters do the defending, and the defensible space makes it safe for them to do that. In California, there are a variety of laws and codes and ordinances that address defensible space, and they address the defensible space around your home in using this theory of zones. Zone 0 to 5 feet, is going to be addressed by a new law, a change to California Public Resources Code that'll come into effect starting this year and be phased in over the next 3 years. And that's going to address a number of items that we know now are extremely important to the survival of your home, the combustibles within 5 feet of your walls. Zone 1, 5 feet to 30 feet, is a space where the CAL FIRE and the state law addresses it directly as the lean, clean, and green zone. This is an area where we want to see no dead vegetation at all. Grasses must be cut to 3 inches or less. Trees need to be limbed up 6 feet from the ground or a third the height of the tree. And we want to see spacing put between shrubs and plants. From 30 to 100 feet, the law requires that you provide basic maintenance, not removal of trees, removal of dead vegetation only. You don't necessarily, under the law, need to cut your dry grasses from 30 to 100 feet, although we strongly recommend that. When we look at this in relation to how homes actually ignite, I'm going to close with this. It's a reminder that 60 to 90% of homes lost during wildfires ignite from the embers that land on them or within 5 feet of them. There's nothing in the current law that addresses this issue. So when we talk about defensible space, when we talk about defensible space as a law, when we look at it as a law enforcement issue, we're really focusing on 10% of the homes that are lost during wildfires. But it's important to note that 100% of the homes that don't have defensible space are vulnerable during a wildfire.
All right, and we're back again. We are thrilled with Todd's myth busting. In fact, we like it so much, you'll start seeing a lot more of that in our future webinars, because unfortunately there are a lot of myths out there, and that's why public education is really so important. The one that I get a kick out of, because it really is the granddaddy of all of these, I don't think a day goes by that I don't get something in my email about, my neighbor has this tree and the tree is a hazard and it's going to burn down my home. Larry, you ever run into that?
Every day. I think it's just a natural progression of, after doing this for almost 2 decades, it's been common throughout my career. I think it's sometimes easier to look over the fence than, and Todd makes a great point of looking down below. And when we engage some of the vegetation complaints we go on, we certainly start with the complainant and their property to make sure they're in good shape. And we want to go see what they're looking at. But I think oftentimes our focus is beyond the fence instead of on our side of the fence. And I think the common thread of every point of this discussion is trying to reduce the sequence of ignitions and trying to reduce things from the house out. I think oftentimes what we find is that people are worried about things that inevitably aren't going to have an impact on their house, the real threat to those homes. And it's been kind of, we've talked about it a bunch already, is that Ember broadcast and what's happening in that zone 0. I think we could make monumental steps in achieving better resiliency by doing or using a house out approach and really taking care of that first 5 feet away from all of our structures. The aggregate of that behavior and that change would have a dramatic impact on the resiliency of our neighborhoods and our opportunity for our people to go out and defend those fires and go. We want to go and we want to protect homes that have done that work to lighten our load, because it's such a monumental load when we respond to these events.
Great, that's really good. One of the things that has come up in a lot of our webinars that we've talked about is we can be both fire safe and sensitive to the environment. And when some of these programs were first proposed, there was some concern, oh, you guys are going to be cutting down all the trees. As you've heard us talk about tonight and over for the whole year we've been saying this, we're not anti-tree. Trees are not the main problem out there. You saw all that stuff that Jack Cohen showed, whatnot after. But trees can be maintained very safely. Sometimes a tree does have to be removed. It's not like it never happens. But the maintenance of trees is really important. Proper limbing up, the placement of them. Sometimes they need to be thinned a bit, spaced, but that's healthier for the tree anyway. So another thing that came up in this is defensible space inspection programs. And I know, Larry, you and Todd have done just a ton of work around this. Can you tell us what's happening about defensible space inspections, evaluations in your area?
I think we started 3 years ago. We identified an issue that we certainly in all of our agencies didn't have the manpower to switch gears, especially during the height of fire season, to go out and really make an impact and create the boots on the ground approach to meeting with homeowners and identifying defensible space in ways that they can better mitigate those hazards on their properties. We started with a group of 8 3 years ago that graduated to 16 last year. With funds through the MWPA and our ability to make it a more robust group, to provide more training, we are now pushing 26 people out into the environment. They just finished a 2-week academy. Currently, they're stationed at the College of Marin, and we have a fantastic group of some real bright individuals that have not only looked at what they want to do as a seasonal opportunity, but they want to do what they can. Most of them are Marin residents. They want to have an impact on their community. So we're creating that boots on the ground approach to go out and do anywhere from 10 to 15,000 inspections this summer. I think in the first 2 weeks, they're close to 1,000. You'll see them in your neighborhoods in the next 2 to 3 months. With that, it's an evaluation. And I think that's the second part where there's this myth that a citation program or enforcement is going to fix our problem. It would be, I always use the analogy that if for whatever reason they changed the speed limit on Sir Francis Drake from 35 to 15 and just started writing tickets the next day, we want to get very far very fast, and people will be pretty upset. It's the same concept with our program. We're trying to give people the opportunity to learn, to grow, to find ways to apply the prescription they're going to get through the Defensible Space program to make some good changes in their property. And with that, this year, we're going to roll out a program that kind of identifies the problems on properties. We're going to give them a hazard ranking from high, medium to low, so we can plan, to make these changes. A lot of these homes have spent 40 years growing vegetation and making choices that are impacting their resiliency. We're trying to create a prescription to give people the opportunity to look at their biggest hazards first and really approach reduction of those hazards first before we move on to some of the other projects which might be easier to accomplish. I think as we break it into smaller pieces, and that's what we're directing our folks to do, is to understand that, it's a lot easier to do 10 small things than it is to do one big thing, and really focus on those the big red flag items that are going to have the most impact during a fire scenario.
So what kind of documentation can the homeowners expect from this program?
Currently, we're just completing a massive build out of a brand new application and program, and it's twofold. The first phase of that program is going to give our evaluators and inspectors the opportunity to go out with a device and actually capture photographs and really hone in on the locations of things that they're identifying as part of that prescription on the property. Some of these happen in person. If we're lucky enough to meet with somebody on site, it's great to walk that property and really have that conversation with the homeowner. But as we move out of COVID and we have less people at home, certainly we're going to try to capture as much as we can from the public right away. We're not going to go onto your property or behind fences. We're not going to see the whole property, but we encourage people to re-engage with us if they have follow-up questions. With the information and the metrics that they're able to capture, they're going to be able to create a report. The homeowners will get a 6-digit number. It'll allow them to log in and see the results of that inspection. A lot of times what we find is that walk and talk that we do when we used to write things out on a form and then we deliver that to the person, it sort of gets lost in translation, or the excitement, or sometimes the depth of some of these evaluations. It's hard for people to kind of reimagine what some of those things were after the fact. So this new program, the second phase, it's really exciting. It's more of an electronic delivery of all that material that's going to give them the opportunity to see on their property where these things are issues. They're going to see photos of the exact issue. It's going to tie them to Fire Safe Marin and other resources to identify best practices to correct some of these things. It's also going to give them a great opportunity to engage with the fire service if they have follow-up questions, if they want to report some of the work that they've done. But the end intent is to create a manageable list where we can look at knocking out some of those high hazards first, and then maybe a few months down the road, or as time and money and enthusiasm persists, will allow people to pick off some of those smaller items down the road. But it's really a categorical change. I don't think it's happening anywhere else that I'm aware of in California, the depth of this application and how we're going to push forward this information, create some opportunities to get more educational material specific to the violations or the ideas or concepts that are found on your property, and tie together those messages. So now there's a really quick, easy resource you can go back and work with to identify, to learn, and then to apply those to your property when you're trying to create defensible space or home hardening.
Yeah, I've had a chance both to speak with the people who are going to be doing the home evaluations. It's just a great group, really enthusiastic, very well trained. And I had kind of a sneak peek at the documentation Larry's talking about. It's fantastic. I think people are really going to get a lot of value out of it. We're really excited about it. One follow-up question to that is, if a homeowner wants to make an appointment to have their home evaluated, is that possible?
Of course. We evaluate not only through our Defensible Space program. Some of our communities have resale inspections if you're in the course of selling your home, or if you're going to be purchasing a home. Some communities do that. I think all communities, and I'll speak for all of the Central Marin agencies, the Greater Ross Valley, certainly contacting your fire prevention division, and I can give out those names if that's helpful, but it's Todd, Lando in Central Marin, myself in Kentfield, Rob Bastinon or Jamal Cook in Ross Valley, extending all the way out into West Marin. Getting a hold of those folks, certainly that's one of our major objectives, is to go out and work with homeowners. We do them almost daily as time permits. Certainly a great program like this, I'm sure, is going to fill up our voicemails and our emails with requests, but we're happy to do that. That's, we're kind of if we were to use a sports analogy, we're the coaches in this exercise. We're going to give you the game plan. We're going to tell you how to best be successful, but in the end, it's going to be the community that are the players that carry out that game plan and really can put that work to good use to make things happen. And we're happy to go out and write that prescription and answer those questions.
Great, thanks. A really common question that comes up with so many of the things we talk about, and there's a couple of them right now, have to do with financial assistance. So I'll take a stab at answering some of that. This is kind of a multi-part answer, but the mere fact that we're doing these evaluations now is really because of the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority, tax dollars at work. So that's the first level of assistance, because people in the past oftentimes thought their homes were safe because they didn't ever receive evaluation or a notice of a problem. So going out and doing this is sort of the first step of some assistance to get things done. A second one that's out there that's free is the chipper program. So if you need to make some improvements to your property and you need to clear some things out there, chipper service is going to come by. It's going to come to every, or available at least, to every home in Marin County twice this year. And they can haul some things away. That saves a lot of money for you. But I know people are really more concerned, how do I get grants for this? How do I get money? Some of that's coming down the road. The Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority is going to have a grant program. It's not going to be tomorrow. It's going to take a little bit of time to get it stood up, but they approved it in their budget this year. It will be focused on need, and it'll be probably need-based, and there'll be another focus on maybe the elderly and the access and functional needs community and so forth. So it won't just be blanket for everybody. But there are also some jurisdictions within the Ross Valley that are looking at creating some local grant programs to provide some additional assistance. It would be great for all of this if we could just say, whatever you need, we got it, we'll just pay for it. But we know that's not realistic. But there is going to be some help coming down the road. And I also know that Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority is applying for some extra assistance to make their grant program larger from Cal Fire State of California. So there is some help coming down the road. And again, wish we had the magic wand for everybody, but there will be some help coming out there. Let me take a quick look and see. Here's a question. It's kind of related now. What about controlled burns in Marin County?
I think that happens in a couple different facets. As we continue to stand up the MWPA, certainly all of our agencies and our zones, and for those that aren't aware, the Marin County is broken up into a few zones where we can apply some of these practices. I think fire on the ground is certainly one concept that helps achieve some things. We do that in some training where we just completed some in Novato that's going to help not only train our oncoming seasonals, but give us the opportunity to create some breaks. But that's just one thing that we do. And it's being embraced more throughout the state of California as a really great tool to take care of some of these low issues that we have not up in the canopy. I think when we look at controlled burns and when we look at the MWPA and projects that are being developed, obviously, there's going to be some delay because there's a huge environmental study that needs to be done on many of these projects to identify that. In some places, the use of fire isn't the most practical. Looking at grazing, looking at created shading fuel breaks, using hand and mechanical ways to remove or thin or reduce fuel in certain vegetation models, that's going to be a concept. So I think we would be short-sighted if we thought that it's only about going and creating burns to reduce fuels in some areas. There's really many different ways that we can accomplish reducing that fuel and creating some resiliency on the topography.
Yeah, I think that's well put. I'm a fan of prescribed burns myself, but it really depends. If you're in the Tahoe area, somewhere like that with larger forests and whatnot, it really can make good sense. Our primary problem here is not the open space or the water district, whatever. As you're hearing tonight, our focus is on home hardening, on adapting our homes to what we need to do. And it's not, obviously, it's not easy to do controlled burns right next to homes. But as Larry pointed out, between hand crews, the work of residents, goat grazing, projects like that, we really can accomplish a lot to make all of ourselves a lot safer here. Okay, with that, we probably should keep moving along here. And we're going to hear, speaking of the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority, from Bruce Goines, who's the president of the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority, and again, a little bit more from Mark Brown.
Hi, my name is Bruce Goines. I'm honored to be serving as the president of the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority. I came here with 45 years as a wildland firefighter and a forester and managing statewide programs to help communities reduce their wildfire risk. Here in Marin, we're in a very special place. We have the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority, which is a 10-year initiative, and all of our tax dollars are being invested back into the community to help reduce the risk of the inevitable wildfire. I want to just give you a little history, very brief, as to why the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority was created. I think we all know the fires, catastrophic fires that have occurred all around us, to the north, to the east, to the south. Particularly last year was particularly bad. Your County Board of Supervisors had some vision after the Tubbs fire, which resulted in catastrophic events for Santa Rosa and Coffee Park. Your Board of Supervisors commissioned a group of firemen, law enforcement officials, city managers, and county administrators to take a look at what happened up in the North Bay, and what can we learn from that? What can we do to reduce the risk of something like that occurring here in Marin County? So they put together a team who produced a report. It's called the 2017 Lessons Learned Report, which you can find on the MWPA website if you're interested. But the bottom line was, it said that we needed to coalesce to bring all the resources together, all the fire agencies together, all the cities together, and coalesce and figure out and take an aggressive program to reduce our risks. Secondly, the next year, the county supervisors, again, with that report, the 2019 civil grand jury took up this topic. And the civil grand jury affirmed the 2017 lessons report. And in essence, they said, we need to take this one step further. We need to develop a reliable funding source, and we need for all of our fire agencies to coalesce under a joint powers authority. Then came in 2020 Measure C, and there are a handful of people in the room that you're in who were integral to Measure C coming up to the ballot. Morning, noon, and night, they talked with fire districts, city managers, and in essence, Measure C was passed in 2020. It was one of 4 tax initiatives, the only one that passed. And now we have a 10-year opportunity, $20 million a year, $200 million, which we expect to match through matching funds. But here we are, $20 million a year. The opportunity, 60% of these funds are for vegetation management and clearing, preparing evacuation routes, fire detection and public education. 20% is for defensible space evaluations, and 20% is for local mitigation projects. It's a phenomenal opportunity. This is the opportunity for you, the citizen. I believe your County Board of Supervisors has done their work. I think the fire chiefs are doing their work, and city managers. And this is the time for you, the public, to basically take responsibility and address the hazards and the risks and potentially reduce the potential consequences of a very catastrophic event. So thanks very much.
Hi, my name is Mark Brown, and I have the privilege of serving as the Executive Officer for the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority. That's after 30 years of serving with the Marin County Fire Department and retiring as the Deputy Fire Chief. At the MWPA, our current focus is home hardening. Because what we've learned during catastrophic fires and urban conflagrations is that it's the homes that turn into the primary carrier of fire. And if we can eliminate homes from catching on fire, we can start decreasing the catastrophic nature of these fires. So we want our homes to be hardened so they don't ignite. The next step is that we want a 5-foot non-combustible zone that surrounds our homes so that when embers land around our home, there's nothing to catch them on fire and then catch the house on fire. And then we want to look at smart firescape landscaping to create defensible space. We're not asking people to remove their vegetation, we're asking them to look at how they arrange their vegetation, both horizontally and vertically. We want an ember to land, preferably self-extinguish. But if it doesn't self-extinguish, we want whatever it catches on fire doesn't spread to something else and it just stays within that area. And then finally, we are focused on an evacuation route clearing. There's just so much work that needs to be done. We are so far behind in our vegetation management at a countywide level. Our primary goal is to get people out safely. So we are focusing hard on our evacuation route clearing. To that end, we've purchased the Zone Haven evacuation management platform so we can streamline our evacuation systems. They are not replacing anything that we have currently in place. They aren't replacing, Zone Haven will not replace our notification systems. It will not replace law enforcement or fire going door to door, knocking on your door, telling you it's time to leave. But what it does, it gives us more information so that we can plan better prior to an emergency and during an emergency so we can get people out safer. We are also conducting a study of our ingress and egress routes throughout the county. That way we can evaluate which routes need to be worked on and we can prioritize and get the routes that need the work the most done right away. Our current schedule of projects includes chipper days to support the homeowners with their defensible space work. Low-income defensible space grants, so those who don't have the financial resources to do the work around their home can tap into those grants in order to make their home safe. Along with their home being safe, that makes the rest of the community safe. And then we are looking at creating home hardening matching grants. So residents that want to work on their home, make their homes hardened so they are less likely to ignite, we will match what they are spending in order for them to improve their homes. We discussed the evacuation route clearing. We see that as one of our most important things that we'll be doing this year. And then we will be working on fuel reduction projects in and around our homes near the open space, the wildland-urban interface boundary. We want to create a space where a catastrophic fire could come into and then actually decrease in intensity as it enters into our homes. And we're going to do that with shaded fuel breaks along that wildland-urban interface boundary. And then you're participating in one of our primary tools right now, and that is public education. And what we found is the more the public understands about wildfire and what they can do and what their responsibility is for wildland fire, the safer our communities will be. And thank you for attending. Thank you for being a part of the solution, and thank you for helping decrease the risk to wildfire in Marin.
All right, so I will echo what Mark just said at the end there about thank to all of you for attending. We have quite a ways to go still, but the fact that you're doing this is really important to us, and education is sort of the beginning of all of this. I will say, I think that Bruce and Mark and all the folks over there at the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority have been doing a great job. This is brand new. Took a while to get it stood up. It's just getting started. Pay attention to what's going over the next year or two. You're going to see a lot more work being done, a lot more larger scale projects taking place. And again, they're looking at the county as a whole. Fire knows no boundaries. So there's going to be good strategic decisions made about where the best efforts should go, whether it be doing work to protect us from parts of Mount Tam, helping homeowners to get prepared, wherever it is out there, they're looking at it strategically. And we're going to be chipping away and getting more work done out there. So I'm very proud of the work that they're doing. Larry, has MWPA been helpful to your agency?
They have been, and I think on top of that, I think all the fire agencies have really stood up and supported the MWPA, and now we're seeing the MWPA supporting some of our goals, whether that's local projects, whether that's working as a group, as we're doing really well throughout this greater Ross Valley area. You know, all the agencies have worked very well together and are working very closely with MWPA to kind of tie together all the different things that we've all done individually, I think it's really easy to understand, or at least it is for me, and I hope for everybody else, that a fire that originates in San Rafael can come over Wolf Grade and easily be in Greenbrae or Kentfield. That can spread to the east and get into our neighborhoods in Ross and all the way out. When we look at the scope and magnitude of many of the fires we've had the last few years, I think we've really identified, and with the help of MWPA tying those blocks together, is understanding that this is more of a larger scale zoned problem that we have. And that zone actually increases all the way out to all of Marin County. Historically, when we look at fire behavior in Marin County, there's been fires that have originated to the west that have moved east, or to the north, as far away as Nevada, that have moved their way into San Rafael. I think when we're trying to look at doing things holistically in our individual agencies, and then spreading that out to our neighbors, and then combining projects and really getting the most bang for our buck through the MWPA to use those tax dollars to create projects and study based on our CWPP, which is our wildfire protection plan that we've had here in Marin for many years, that's constantly being updated so we can understand the behavior of fuels and the models that we have. I think I was just getting ready to type back to Tom, who had asked a question, and his question was, how does your scenario planning anticipate a wildfire ignited on the east slope of Mount Tam would spread into the adjoining communities? What preemptive measures are likely to be of any value? And I think that's a very specific question about a very specific face of Mount Tam, but we can apply that to Mount Burdell, we can apply it to Mount Baldy, we can apply that to areas all over Marin. And I think we try to come up with many scenarios in that wildfire protection plan that kind of look at our worst case scenarios, our red flag days. It looks at fuel volume and fuel type. We do extensive studying on fire behavior and how it would be impacted based on different weather conditions and different scenarios. And that's really what we're using as a basis to drive our projects, pardon me. We're looking at, fire history, fire behavior, and the lessons learned from past fires to really hone in on those projects that are going to create that fuel break, that change in fire behavior. And Mark said that in that last video, was to change or lessen the impact on fire as it approaches our communities. I think for this specific example, something that happens mid or upper slope of the east side of Mount Tam, depending on weather conditions, can move away from our communities. But certainly in a change of weather event or the impacts that we have with wind, it can bring it to the edge of our community. So softening up our borders and understanding how projects are going to impact or lessen the degree of fire as it approaches our community is a major goal. And with that, using this great partnership with MWPA and our neighboring agencies, that's what we're using to focus our projects.
That's a great answer. Kind of related to that, for those who really want to dig into this, there's a lot of science behind this. And Marin County just recently updated its community wildfire protection plan. It's a fantastic document. You can go on the Fire Safe Marin website and download it, and you're going to see it's 100 pages plus of great detail of study about every part of Marin, of what the flammability is, what it would mean under different weather conditions, where the risks are. You can locate your individual parcel on this and find out more about what's going on. So there's a tremendous amount of science which is guiding decisions about where to construct the fuel break, where to make defensible space, and so forth. So this is not being just done in a vacuum. So take a look at that if you're interested. It's a fantastic document, our true guiding document of where we're going. All right, with all that said, let's talk a little bit about home hardening. Jen?
You need to harden your home. That's why you're here tonight. I'll just point out that the video that's playing there in the background, that's a home in Napa County, Oakville. It's one of the highest homes anywhere in Napa County. It was impacted by this fire, the one that you see there, in October of 2016. This was about a 50-acre fire that started on the roadside and burned directly up to the house, impacted the house. The house escaped this fire undamaged. There was no insurance claim on this property besides a solar panel array that was down the hill in the bushes. The house itself undamaged. 1 year later, almost to the day the Nuns fire started, it was one of the North Bay fires. Started overnight, burned 50,000 acres, and on day 3 of the fire, it impacted this house directly from the other side. The side that you don't see burning here burned 1 year later. The house again escaped undamaged. The reasons for that are the way the house was designed, the materials that were used to build the house, and careful thought to building a fire-resistant structure.
The best place to start when talking about your ignition zones is the actual home and structure itself. And that's where the term home hardening comes in. Home hardening refers to the maintenance of your structure and the upkeep, as well as the building materials that you've applied to your home.
One of the most interesting concepts that have come out of the studies that have been done on the fires, the large fires that have happened throughout the United States over the past couple years, is this idea that it's not the flame front that actually destroys your house. It's the flying ember storm that will do that damage. So hardening your home actually becomes a very, very important part of this whole wildfire preparedness plan. When it comes to home hardening, there's two aspects or two ways to look at it. The first is the actual construction of the building itself, and when we look at that side, we see things such as the materials that the roof is made of, the material that your siding is made of, what is actually touching the ground, and we also look at the soffits of the house, for example. Are they closed in or are they open? And then the other aspect that we look at is maintenance. So when we talk about maintenance, we're talking about things like, what are you storing under your deck? What do you have up in your gutters? Do you have leaves that have fallen in there that need to be taken care of? Do you need to clean off your roof? If you have a log cabin, are all the holes filled in with putty? The house behind me has some really great examples of home hardening from the construction standpoint. Right next to the ground, there's nothing that's combustible there. The rock goes clear down to the ground, and for the first several feet coming up, there's no way for a fire on the ground to get into the house. The siding above the rock is limited combustible. That means that it does have the ability to burn, but it's treated with a substance that will prevent it from actually sustaining fire. A lot of the times people like to have a wood siding on their house, and that's okay as long as it's installed correctly and you are using the correct materials. So if you look at the soffits in this house, they're boxed in. And what that does is it protects those areas from collecting any of these flying embers that happen to come along during a wildfire event. And then especially nice on this house is the metal and asphalt shingle roof. This house has a combined, a combo style covering, which is just fine. Both of them are very good at keeping those embers from having a place where a fire can start. Having a redwood deck or a deck that's made of combustible materials is not the end of the world. If you do have that type of deck, you certainly don't need to tear it out. You just need to do a little bit of maintenance on it. Make sure it's treated with a non-combustible sealant. From a home hardening aspect, maintenance is probably the most important thing you can do. No matter what your house is made out of, no matter what material you have on the side of your house, what material your deck is made out of, or what material you have on the roof, that has to be maintained. If you look around your house and you find places where the wind blows leaves, those are the same places where embers are going to come in a firestorm. And those are the same places where those embers will sit there and smolder until the conditions are just right for them to ignite whatever they've landed in. Another large risk for your house is openings. Any opening that goes into your attic, any vents in your soffits or vents even in your gables or on the side of your house, they have the potential of collecting flying embers. Back in the day, we used to put 1/4 inch mesh on these openings to keep things from getting in. The latest science from the large fires that we've had within the United States over the past couple years has shown us that 1/4 inch mesh is not tight enough.
I am inspired by the Park City Fire Department, and I'm going to harden my home. I'm going to change my attic vents, and I'm going to put screening underneath my decks. And I'm going to teach you how to do it. Let's go. First thing you need to know is I am not a handyman, but I'm going to go for this because I need to make my house more safe. Remove that screen. I can do it. You can do it. Embers out. Measure it first. That is a 2-inch opening, and there is a stock 2-inch vent for you at the hardware store. You're going to use those pliers to pull that wire. You're going to use that hammer to tap in the new vent, and you're going to use that sandpaper to clear out paint and gunk so that vent slides in easily. They are a little fragile. Don't hit them too hard. There's the vents you have to choose from. I chose those Ember vents with 16-inch screen on the backside. Vulcan vents have a different system, and I'll show you. There's the ones I got, 44 of them for around my house, about $1.50 each. This is the Vulcan vent. It's got louvers that keep out the embers, lots of teeny louvers. And on the other side is a honeycomb that will melt if it is exposed to high heat. These are double the price of the vents I went with, so I went on a budget. But I did sand them in carefully, and I worked hard to get them in, and I sanded, and I sanded, and I sanded to get them in. And once you've sanded enough, they slide right in. If you do not sand enough, they will bend and bend. Bend and bent. Here we are. Also, as you make your way around your house, it's a good idea to get some caulk and just fill in holes, any kind of crack or groove that you think maybe embers could embed in, and start a smoldering fire. It's thorough, it's good, and now you're done. Look at those vents. The louvers are pointed down. They're in. It's time for some more paint and sanding and make my house more beautiful. But before I do that, I want to work on my low deck out back. It needs some love too. I went and got some screening materials. I got a roll of 1/8-inch stainless steel metal mesh. Easy for me to say. And then I went to my crusty deck and I turned it a little less crusty. I cleaned it up and I got ready to apply the mesh. I measured down and I cut extra. Mesh is malleable. I measured long. It can be formed to the space, but if it's too small, you can't fit it in. And here's some tools I used. First, I used that grinder. Now, everybody doesn't have a grinder. You can also use some tin snips, and I'll show you what that looks a little later. As I grinded, it was a little wild and fast, and sparks were flying. Not recommended for the dry season. This is a winter project, winter, spring. You don't want to do it during fire season. These are the tin snips that worked really well. It cut like butter and it was under control. I probably will use these from the future. And here we are underneath. I tacked it up with the staples and just made sure it all fit. And then I came back with my screw gun and made sure it was tight up against the wood. We don't want embers to slip through. Really what you're doing is you're making sure that no leaf matter or sticks or twigs will blow in during our fog season when the wind howls and would push in unwanted material. And then if you happen to have an ember storm, then that material could kindle and catch this deck. And then I put some rock down even to make sure it would stay down and it wouldn't be up against the dirt and it wouldn't rot as quickly. And this is what it looks like when it's done. It's ready for some more hardscaping. I did put some weed cloth down so the weeds wouldn't come up again. And you can do this as well. Good job, people. You can do it. You know what the steps take. And thank you for making Marin a little bit more fire safe.
All right, back live again. We at Fire Safe Marin, we had a little discussion about when we were putting that together. Obviously, we picked a non-Marin home there from Park City. And the reason is it's actually very hard to find what I would consider to be pristine model homes that really represent all the aspects of fire safety here in Marin. So that's a brand new home and you can really clearly see all the elements on there. So that's why we picked that. I want to thank the folks in Park City, but that is a good example. And you can see that home is in the middle of a forest out there, but the way that home is constructed and you see the defensible space around it, it really is in very good shape. And that's those home hardening elements in it, the types of things that we're looking for in our homes here in Marin County. Then we went on and we had a little bit of fun creating the do-it-yourself segment there with Aaron. And one of the things that you're going to be seeing starting in the fall from Fire Safe Marin is more focus on things that you really can do yourself. How do you go about it? As you see, some of that stuff is pretty simple. It may not be pristine and perfect, but it makes a big difference. Screening that deck is important. And of course, there's a big emphasis on vents and so forth. So anyway, all that being said, I'm going to ask Larry probably the toughest question of the night. And that is, if you're going to make a recommendation to homeowners about where they should start on home hardening, what's probably the most important thing that they could begin with?
I think kind of that low hanging fruit is taking care of vents. I think, like I said, we've talked a lot about ember intrusion. We've talked about, it's not only embers, it could be hot smoke and gas that gets up into your attic space, that gets underneath into your vents below your foundation, if you have those. I think it's certainly something anybody can do. And if not, they have a family member that could help them do that. I think I talked to a homeowner recently and he had a great concept, and I'm going to steal it from him because that's what we do. It's create a budget, create a plan, and then execute. I think we budget for all sorts of things from vacations to home improvements. Certainly, I think when we're talking about changing that mentality and how we grow as a community, we need to start looking at budgeting for some of these items. As the need increases, we're seeing better pricing on some of these smaller vents for both your foundation and for your attic. And those are weekend projects that, a family can do together, or neighbors can help other neighbors accomplish. For a long time, we've put ventilation into homes, and we're finding out that that's a simple way for us to burn down our house from the inside out. So if I was going to pick one home hardening project to start with, not only because it's more economical, but also anybody can do it. I think we get blinded by the idea that we have to change windows or change our roofs or change our siding. We're aware that that's not feasible for some people. That's not a budgeted update that some people are able to complete, but certainly working on your vents, limiting that debris getting into your house, cleaning up under the decks like Aaron did in that video, that was great. I think when you start to break down the hazard and finding the mitigation and keeping those in small bite-sized pieces, it's certainly accomplishable.
That's a great answer. One thing I really like about what you said is that it's not realistic for most of us to do all these things immediately. It'd be great if we could, but have a plan a little bit each year, and over a period of time, quicker than you think, we're going to you will have accomplished quite a bit to make your home safer there. Another one is, as I mentioned, it's hard to find the sort of the new home construction like we saw there at Salt Lake in Marin. And all of our communities are a little bit different. So Larry and Todd, you're in the Central Marin area there. Is there some common characteristics of the housing in this particular area, the Ross Valley, as an example, that creates some extra concern for you when the homes were built or whatever?
Yeah, and certainly I think a lot of our home inventory was built decades ago, most of it between the 40s and 70s. And the construction methods and values at that time, people wanted things that were attractive. So we wound up with wood siding, maybe wood shake roofs. Certainly during that time building, it was very in vogue to use a lot of ventilation for attics and for foundations. I think what we want to do now is we want to look at better practices to correct those things. From a fire prevention officer side, we've gotten together with all of our agencies, and we're trying to incorporate those rules and when people apply some of those new building standards to projects. Anybody that's doing a remodel that's greater than 50% of their interior square footage, they're going to be asked if they're in the wildland urban interface. Based on today's building codes, they'll update some of those features. So it'll be part of a project. Certainly anybody building new is going to build to that standard, but that doesn't mean that the person that has an older home that isn't planning a big remodel or looking to completely overhaul their entire home can't make these incremental changes. And that's where looking at and budgeting to and planning for some changes over time. Certainly there's been a big push to replace windows as we have aging roofs. Those get replaced, making smart choices, to select a Class A roof that's ember resistant, if we make updates to siding or stucco, our paint choices, our ability to take care of our vents like we've already talked about. These are all ways that we can impact the strength or resiliency of our home. There's also choices we can make around our home that might be a little bit easier to accomplish, and that's what we choose as far as furniture, what we choose as far as doormats or decorations that we put around our homes that are highly flammable, that certainly impact how a fire is going to impact our structure. So there's a lot of great information on Fire Safe Marin. If you spend some time going through a few of those pages, some good videos that kind of illustrate some of those concepts, I think this is something doable, and it's just a matter of getting over that hump and putting some of these things into place.
That's great. Thanks for the plug for the info on Fire Safe Marin. Truly, there is some really good stuff and some great videos on what you need to do out there. Cool. All right. So let's move on to community preparedness. Working together, that's where we want to go.
Hello. Hi. My name is Nancy. I'm the leader of the local Firewise site for the neighborhood. Okay. And we're all about helping each other fire harden our homes and our gardens.
Oh, well, I could sure use help. I mean, I don't know what you can do, but it's such a mess down there.
Oh, that would be wonderful, because we are looking to come together and help out with some gardens that need some extra love and care. And is that something that we could do?
That would be fantastic.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah. When do you do that?
Well, we try to do it every Saturday or every other Saturday, or just when people can make it, and some people might be able to show up on Saturday, and I think we can pull it together. Would that be good?
That would be fantastic.
Okay, great.
Yes.
So 10 o'clock on Saturday?
Wonderful, yeah. I'll see you there.
Great. Okay, thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Hey Ronan, I think Finn's gonna need a walk. Can you take him?
Oh yeah. Hey guys, this is an alert from Alert Marin. There's a fire in the area. The embers shower could happen anytime with these high winds. We need to go.
Okay, let's get going. It's a red flag day, so I've got everything right there inside the door. We've got the to-go bag. I think I've got my glasses. I've got medicine, ID. You two get the puppy in the kennel and load him in the car.
Let's make sure Miss Benson, our neighbor, also has gotten the alert and that she's aware that we have to get going.
Great. Let's get our masks. Get long sleeve shirts, hats. Let's get going.
Hey, Miss Benson, we just got an alert from Alert Marin. There's a fire in the area, and
Where?
we're going to get some ember showers. It's right up on the hill.
Oh my
It's
God.
time to go. Can you get your important papers
Yes.
and your medicines or anything else you need?
I don't have a car.
You could fit in with us. Why don't you come with us then?
Okay. I'll be ready in a few minutes.
All right, sounds
okay.
good.
You want me to get him?
Welcome to Fire Safe Marin's webinar series.
Our fire season has increased by about 75 days a year.
This is how you will receive your emergency notifications.
We continued to go away from the fire, and at this point we started realizing it was around us. We're seeing flames.
We at Fire Safe Marin are excited to be sponsoring a chipper event in your neighborhood. This video shares some simple guidelines for you to prepare your chipper pile to ensure that it will be picked up.
Wildfires have always been a part of California, but recently we've had more fires and they've been more destructive than ever before. That's why we've created this program for you. It's called Ready, Set, Go. When we think of defensible space, it's helpful to imagine different zones, depending on the distance from the building we want to protect. Today, we're only going to talk about the most important of the defensible space zones. Studies have shown that 60 to 90% of homes destroyed in wildfires are ignited by tiny embers.
Hi, I'm Faye Mark from the University of California Marin Master Gardeners. We're often asked the question, what are the safest plants? Truth is, all plants burn. When it comes to fire-smart landscaping, it's much more important to consider where a plant is situated and how it is maintained than to assume some plants are better than others.
In the long run, loss of pollinators could create a shift in vegetation
with plant reproduction favored by wind pollination. Wind-pollinated species include grasses and pine trees, which tend to be more fire-prone. Fire safety can be both beautiful and support biodiversity. We can have it all with careful planning.
How does working as a community help improve fire safety?
You can't do everything. You can work on your own property and do everything you need, vegetation management, house hardening, and then if your neighbors don't know what to do or are unaware of the whole process, you're still vulnerable. So when you work together as a neighborhood, you're able to learn how to do it and what to do, and everybody becomes jointly embarked on the same project. I also noticed a very surprising element about forming a Firewise community, and that is that even people who aren't actively members of our group, they might be in a nearby neighborhood or even in our neighborhood but not participating. Once they see us start doing the work, it's a process of modeling. All of a sudden, without us saying anything, they're doing the work themselves. And areas that were completely overgrown are within a month or two suddenly getting clearer. And you can see that they're aware that this is an issue and they're taking it on board and doing it on their own initiative. So that has been a very gratifying area for just seeing how people are responding to the whole neighborhood at work.
It is making sure that everybody gets the information that we want to get to them about a chipper day or a broom pull.
The hardest part is the initial outreach. If you have it on your mind you want to form a community and you haven't done this kind of work before, it can be a little intimidating to reach out. And I think that's the hardest step, is to reach out and find some like-minded neighbors who are also worried about it. The way we did it was we simply put a notice on next door saying, "Hello neighbor, are you concerned about wildfire in your neighborhood?" and suggested a meeting time. And the next step is, having got a few neighbors involved, is we did some door knocking. Obviously in the time of COVID, it's hard to do that. But you can leave information on people's doorknobs or doorsteps, and built our database. And that's really very important, because once you have your database, you have the people that you reach out to. They don't have to be the people who come to the meetings. They just are people who are interested in the topic. And then once we're all connected, we started the process, and it was very straightforward.
The Firewise community is a way of getting people to address a problem. So people looking at Paradise, looking at the Napa and Santa Rosa fires, we're ready to say, yeah, it's possible we could have a fire here. Let's do something about it. And it's not onerous, and maybe if we work together, we can figure out what to do best.
We've introduced you to what community preparedness looks like. Yet, we know it's quite another thing to embark on this endeavor in your own community. So, FireSafe Marin has created what we call the Universal Firewise Activities, or UFAs. These 7 activities will help you build a robust fire-adapted community. The first UFA is to develop a comprehensive contact list of residents. You can reach out to your neighbors on Nextdoor by posting an announcement inviting people to join your efforts. You can print out door hangers and place them on gates or under doormats. Once you get an initial interested group, host a social event. You can do this via Zoom and show one of FireSafe Marin's videos and have a Q&A after. Or, once it's safe, you can host a neighborhood block party and spend a few minutes letting people know things that they can do to make your community safer from wildfire and inviting them to join. One of the best ways, of course, is to reach out to the neighbors that you are already friendly with. Share your ideas. Surely they know other neighbors who may want to join efforts to make the neighborhood safer from the threat of wildfire. Holding regular meetings keeps the efforts rolling. Some communities do this monthly, others quarterly. It depends on what your community wants to do. You can hold meetings via Zoom to talk about concerns and activities. Try showing one of our 5-minute videos posted on our YouTube channel and have a discussion after. Of course, when it's safe, You can hold meetings in your home or on the patio. But I have to say, Zoom has been a bit easier. No need to tidy up or rush out the door. A key aspect of being a fire-adapted community is education. FireSafe Marin has several resources for you to pull from. Our website has a nationwide audience owing to its depth of information. There, you can find printable materials such as our evacuation checklist and homeowner's guide to wildfire preparedness. Over 75 videos and webinars can be found on our YouTube channel. Guest speakers include top fire scientists, veteran firefighters, and the latest information in the world of fire and wildland-urban interface. Don't forget to refer people to our Facebook page for quick updates. Fuel reduction can go a long way to make our neighborhood safer for members. Encouraging participation in free annual Chipper Day events is a good way to make some headway. You can email those on your contact list, distribute door hangers, post the event on Nextdoor and Facebook, and post flyers in community hotspots. Holding annual neighborhood walks to reassess your progress and to note areas that still need improvement is a good way to keep current. Are flammable juniper and Italian cypress disappearing? Do you need to increase efforts on a neglected aspect of home hardening? Celebrate your successes too. By holding an annual evacuation drill, you are encouraging people to prepare before it's time to go. Preparing a to-go kit, dressing for safety, getting your family and pets prepared, and knowing your evacuation route beforehand goes a long way towards a quick and safe evacuation with less anxiety. Start with our training presentation and follow one of the drills outlined in our evacuation template. Notify your local fire department of serious hazard through their wildfire mitigation specialists. Get to know these folks. They perform defensible space inspections and are your go-to people for hazards in your community. By using these UFAs, you'll be able to engage, educate, and activate your community to make your community safer from the dangers of wildfire.
All right, back again. So we had a little bit of fun making that first video, which we kind of think of as the parable. But there's a real truth to it, and that is so many people who've been saved in these large wildfires are saved because the neighbor came and helped them. Sadly, most of the people who don't survive are people who don't have the mobility to get out. They don't have a car, or maybe they have functional needs issues or other things going on. But when the neighbor knocks on the door and says, "Can I help you and get you out of here?" Great, jump in the car and away we go. So neighbor helping neighbor is critical to access all this. We're big fans of the FireWise program. I want to mention that the neighborhood response group program is also very good, and the two are very compatible. I think we work together very well. I think they kind of blend really on some level. Both are very good, but that is really a mechanism of organizing neighbors to work together to make themselves safe. And if you saw from what we call the universal FireWise activities, if you really take a look at that, it's really easy stuff to do. It's not a huge time commitment, but it makes a big difference in where we're going. So Larry, in the Ross Valley here, how well is the concept of neighbor helping neighbor and FireWise and NRG embraced?
It's getting better. We still have some challenges. I think a very common thing that I'll share with everybody is oftentimes when we get complaints, one of the questions I always ask is, have you talked to your neighbor? And oftentimes they'll say, no, that person's not friendly, or I've never spoken to them. And we're really trying to get our community to engage. Oftentimes I'll go talk to that person that's had the complaint against them, and they're very nice and they're very kind. And maybe they're shy, or they don't fit in with their community, or maybe they're getting older and they don't feel comfortable. I think it all starts with a smile or a wave. A lot of times when you're walking around your neighborhood or driving through your neighborhood, start that initial contact just by waving at somebody or smiling. What I'm finding now is each year that our program develops, and certainly as we've had more outreach, Todd and I have done dozens upon dozens of neighborhood walk and talks where we actually get people out on the street and we create a walk that identifies some issues. And it's not to put anybody specifically on the spot, but it's to engage, to understand that we all have the same issues. We're all challenged by the same factors in our neighborhoods. Really, sometimes it just needs a little outreach and help to engage that that neighbor that maybe you don't see all the time. We're seeing great traction with people getting involved with their groups through Nextdoor and other resources where they can create phone lists, where they can engage with those people that they don't always see, or maybe get a phone number so they can help with that alerting process and that evacuation process. So we're making great strides, but the work isn't done. We still have some work to do.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I think COVID set all of us back a little bit because the face-to-face makes a difference, like Larry's pointing out. But I think that maybe the most powerful part of all that we watch there is the testimony of actual Firewise leaders, what their experience is, what difference it made and whatnot. I could preach become Firewise here all day, but when you hear Lucy or Stephen or others talking about there, I think that really gives you a sense of how to bring it all together. So we're coming up to the last segment. And although neighborhood preparedness, community preparedness is really important, nothing ultimately beats personal preparedness. We all have some responsibility towards that. And besides defensible space and home hardening and whatnot, there are steps that we all need to take to make ourselves and our families safer.
In the following section, you will hear about personal and evacuation preparedness. Long before a wildfire strikes, all Marin residents need to take action to be ready. There are many simple things that you can do today. The best advice to help you remain safe during a wildfire is to evacuate early.
When we discuss wildfire preparedness, especially how it relates to evacuation, we like to break it down into 3 topics: ready, set, go. This is a national program that follows the ready, set, go mantra, and it's important. It works. It helps us keep organized. The ready is discussing preparedness, things you do in advance of a fire. Being set is the situational awareness that you need to have when a wildfire is burning in your neighborhood, but really anytime during fire season. And go refers to going early, making the decision to leave. When's it time to evacuate? What situational awareness is when we're referring to a wildfire. Understanding what weather can trigger wildfires, contribute to especially the catastrophic wildfires, is so important.
Hello, I'm Captain Oscar Arenas with the Ross Valley Fire Department. You may have seen signs like this at the entrance of your neighborhood. These signs means that a red flag warning has been declared by the National Weather Service. When that happens, Marin County fire chiefs consult with each other to determine which areas of Marin are most at risk. The chiefs then issue an order for signs to be posted. During red flag warnings, extreme caution is urged for all residents because fires are more likely to ignite, and those that do are more likely to spread and be more difficult to control. Red flag warning conditions are typically related to wind events lasting at least 8 hours. During these events, vegetation is very dry, humidity is low, and no rain has occurred in the last 24 hours. Relative humidity and wind speed are the primary factors driving a red flag warning declaration. Red flag warnings are designated for a specific span of time. The warnings remain in effect until it expires, is canceled, or upgraded.
Situational awareness also has to do with how you get your alerts and warnings. You need to take steps in advance, like now, today, if you haven't already, to ensure that you're going to receive the electronic warnings that we send out. In Marin, we use Alert Marin, we use Nixle. We have options to send out things like the wireless emergency alerts, similar to the presidential alerts that ring every cell phone in a region. We use NOAA weather radios, but you've got to be registered for, and you've got to understand how you might receive alerts when a fire's threatening your community. Alert Marin, I mentioned, this is our primary emergency notification system in Marin County. Virtually every county in Northern California has a similar system. This is how you will receive your emergency notifications when an evacuation for a wildfire is necessary. This is the best tool we've got. It works well. Nixle is a service that's available to any government agency to send out informational notices. We'll oftentimes repeat messages that went out via Alert Marin on Nixle, but we can't target specific street addresses with Nixle. So Nixle, little more broad reach. Because of that, we use it for informational notices that should go out to the entire community rather than targeted messages. Social media, commonly used. It's a great source of information. Your fire department, sheriff's office is probably using social media like Twitter, Facebook, and Nextdoor to get information out. This is going to be lower level information. When we use these notification systems, the terminology that's distributed is really important. An evacuation order. This is the most important message you might receive. This means that you need to evacuate immediately. You're going to take care of your personal safety. An evacuation warning is the next level down. This is a notification that says that you do have some time to prepare. You've certainly got time to prepare yourself, your family, your pets. You also probably have some time to prepare your home. We in Marin County only use the evacuation warning if you have in the belief of the firefighters who are directing the fire, at least 2 hours to evacuate. Oftentimes it's much more. We want you to consider things like battery backups for your garage doors, especially, but also for your communication. For about $99, you can install a garage door battery backup that will open and shut your garage door. On the packaging for the one they have at Home Depot right now, it says it'll open the door about 50 times during a power outage. It also keeps the button lit up on the wall, makes it easier to find if you need to get out of your garage door at night. And really importantly, it lets you close your garage door behind you. This is important. When you leave, we want you to shut that door behind you to keep embers from blowing into your garage. A battery backup for your phone system can keep your phones ringing. These will run your phones for about 12 hours typically. We want you to be able to receive the phone calls from Alert Marin if the power were to go out overnight while you were asleep and you weren't aware. NOAA weather radios. You're going to hear a lot more about these weather alerting radios. It's what people in the Midwest use to be alerted when a tornado is nearby, and we're going to be using these more and more to alert people to wildfires because they're battery operated and they don't depend on the internet or the grid. Here's this checklist. This checklist is available at firesafemarin.org. On our evacuation page. It's downloadable in a PDF format. You really ought to have one. Divided into 3 columns. The first column are things that you always do when there's a wildfire burning nearby or there's an evacuation warning or order. The second column are things that you'll only do if you have time. So really things that you'll do if there's an evacuation warning or if you're simply concerned because it's maybe a red flag warning has been issued or we're deep into fire season. And the third column are things that you'll do when you're actually evacuating, when you're on the road, once you've left. We need to be prepared for emergencies because we live here in a place that's just constantly confronted by emergencies. Wildfire Go kits have some special needs, but I'll real quickly run through what I think are critical in your Wildfire Go kit. Flashlights. Doesn't matter what time you evacuate, you are going to need a flashlight. And every firefighter I know carries multiple flashlights, one in every pocket, with backup spare batteries. So have a headlamp, have multiple handheld flashlights, and have spare batteries in your Go kit. Make sure that you've got an AM/FM radio. Our checklist goes through items like spending cash, maybe a duplicate credit card, important documents, copies of your passports, your insurance information, a small first aid kit, drinking water. In your Wildfire Go kit, you need to have enough drinking water to get you out of town. You need to have some high energy food. You need to have some basic tools. Store this in a backpack. We want you to be able to put this on your back and move on foot. Even though we're going to talk a lot about evacuating by car and why that should be your first choice, it still needs to be portable and something that you can take with you if you do need to leave your car in that outlier scenario. Keep these in your car if you're always with your car or near your front door during fire season. Make a kit for every member of your family, especially for your kids. Make a kit that might be a little different than yours for your pets. It looks like this with your Go kit, a spare set for everybody. And every item shown here, long cotton or wool clothing, long pants, long shirt, Cotton or wool is important. It won't melt from embers. It won't melt from radiant heat. It provides a huge amount of protection to you. Heavy boots, leather boots. That floppy cotton hat they're wearing is important. It's not there for looks, obviously. It's there to prevent embers from landing in your hair. The two pieces of life-saving equipment in this picture and that you need to have in your go kit are the goggles and the leather gloves. Let me tell you why. The number one injury for wildland firefighters are eye injuries. Those gloves, equally life-saving. If debris falls into the roadway during a wildfire and blocks your passage, it fell there because it was on fire. You very well may be able to move that debris out of the road as long as you have protection for your hands. We want you to think about your pets. This isn't just because they're adorable and we love our pets. It's because people love their pets so much that they're willing to die for them. Evacuation routes. That you ought to evacuate by car, you do need to know the route you're taking. We get a lot of questions about what route, what's the safest place, what is my route during a wildfire evacuation. We want you to simplify this and think about your route this way. Take the fastest route to the valley floor. And the map that you see here is a new series of evacuation maps that are being published in Marin communities as we speak. These are designed to be easily readable under stress by people who are evacuating. The maps are published in a 3-step process with a citywide or a zone map that helps you figure out which local area map or zone map serves your neighborhood. There are links and QR codes that will allow you to download these maps onto your mobile devices or onto your desktop computer. You can print them. Some of the communities will print these and mail them initially to residents in the neighborhoods. The maps are designed to be printed front and back, and they have an evacuation checklist written by FireSafe Marin.
The Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority commissioned an evacuation risk assessment in early 2021, addressing prevention measures that can be implemented to reduce risks that may affect a successful evacuation before it takes place. The evacuation study identifies and quantifies risk factors like topography, vegetation, traffic constraints, the presence of vulnerable populations, the locations of safe refuges, and the level of preparedness of communities. With this information, agencies will be able to determine and to prioritize improvements that can be made to reduce risks. Learn more about the evacuation study at www.marinwildfire.org. We'd like to introduce you to a new evacuation tool that will soon be launched in Marin County, Zone Haven. This app is going to give local agencies instant and constant information that is viewable by the public. Residents will know exactly what zone they're in, where they need to go in an evacuation. It will help with traffic management and where to put traffic control. As the county gets ready to launch Zone Haven, a Know Your Zone campaign will start so residents can learn which zone they live in and how to use the system.
All right, back here for one last time. If we had a large fire in the North Bay right now, Sonoma, Napa, maybe even parts of Marin, we had a bunch of smoke down here. I can tell you the number one question, and we'd have 25 of them in the Q&A right now, would have to do with evacuation. There's two tricks to being prepared for evacuation, really. The first one is literally to prepare. Think about it ahead of time, have all your stuff lined up. And then the final real trick is be the first one out. So when you get a warning, evacuation order, the first notice of a problem, hit the road. You're not going to be dealing with traffic. You'll be way ahead of everybody. So many people wait a long time to leave, and that's usually the ones who end up getting caught in the traffic jams and whatnot. One thing that's great about the group tonight, I'm taking a look here at the poll results we did earlier, and that was that we had 94% of you are signed up for Alert Marin, and that you just can't beat that. You have to be able to be noticed when something happens. So The last 6% of you get signed up. It's really easy, alertmarin.org. If you're not sure what to do, check in with us at Fire Safe Marin or your local fire department. We'll help you get signed up. But our group tonight is quite well prepared based on the poll, so that's really good. So Larry, evacuation checklist, pre-preparedness and whatnot, what's your feelings about all that, the value of it?
I think it's great. And I, being somebody that, was part of the wine country fires and seeing, not only the initial issues we had with that fire on the Napa side, but the days and weeks after that fire, seeing people show up to aid stations without anything. The number one thing that I heard from many people was, I wish I would have listened and had a bag. And sometimes it feels a little nerdy or corny that you're putting this stuff together in June and you have it out there by the door, you throw it in the back of your car. It feels a little awkward at times, but we need to get past that. Some of the great tips that I've learned from some people during these events, we've all put away our winter clothes. It's getting warmer out here. A lot of times those winter clothes are the greatest resource you can have. Instead of putting them in the closet, throw them in a bag and put those by your front door, or put a bag of clothes in your car. Those are the long sleeve, heavier flannel shirts or cotton shirts like Todd had mentioned, throwing in a pair of gardening gloves. The flashlight is a tremendous resource to have. You look at the campfire and others where they burned in the morning, where at 8 o'clock in the morning, it looks like midnight, really hard visibility. I think there's opportunities to protect yourself and be able to self-preserve if you follow these steps. And I think it's just getting over that hump and making that happen. I realize that's a challenge. This is a little overwhelming. We've covered a lot of great stuff tonight. But looking at, the self-preservation piece first and the property second, take those steps to be prepared to leave, especially if you have medications, especially if you're providing care for somebody else. Kind of go through that checklist. If you're going on vacation, a lot of those same tools are going to go into a bag that you're going to leave with, because you might be leaving for a day. It could be a week. Be that person that is prepared and can survive a couple of days, or go to a friend's house and have some clothes on your back. Another good tip that I've heard is, when people prepare to clean out closets, they want to take stuff to Goodwill, kind of have an eye for some of those things that might not be the greatest fashions at the moment. And instead of donating them, put them in a bag and make those part of your go kit.
Really good advice, Larry. One of the things you heard Jen Gata narrate at this part is that there's some really exciting things that are coming very soon to Marin. So parts of the Ross Valley already have the fire clear maps. I know Fairfax and I think some others do, but the rest of us will be getting them very soon. They're almost done. And then Zone Haven is really a big deal. So this is an application, you put it on your phone, and really it's kind of everything you need to know real time about evacuation, what route you should take, where you should be going, what the traffic looks like. It's pretty spectacular, and it should be it's in the offing, and I think in the next month or two. So that'll be a real plus. And then the last one that in some ways I think will be of the most value to all us is this. It's an evacuation study. You go, oh my gosh, another study. What good's that do? But this is taking a really hard look at all of Marin. Where are the choke points? Where are the issues? And what are practical solutions to improve some of that? So not everything is going to be fixed. We're not going to build a 10-lane freeway for everybody to drive out of here. But there are some improvements that could be made in certain parts of the county, whether it be changes in off-street parking, some reconfiguration of roadways, some work on how the signals work and so forth. So I think that's going to pay huge dividends for us to improve our evacuation flow when we get out there.
I think those are all great points. I think the one thing that I want to emphasize is that, and at the beginning of that video, and I don't want it to get lost, there's 3 stages of evacuation. And oftentimes we'll have a single family residence on fire in a community, and we'll get these follow-up calls going, how come you didn't evacuate us? How come we didn't get messaged? As a professional fire department, all of our agencies respond to fires many, many times. And oftentimes the community isn't even aware, because we're able to extinguish those fires or bring those under control rather quickly. There's always somebody involved in any of our incidents that's looking at the greater impact. If we do move people out of an environment, what is the probability of fire spread? Sometimes it's best to be in your house, close the doors and windows, and stay prepared. I think even in the wildfire scenarios, we're seeing that even more. In times that we're traveling to fires, last year it was a lightning fire in the first lightning complex. As we entered into that Sonoma and Santa Rosa area, we were getting the wireless communications on our phone saying, this is where we're evacuating, this is where we're going to shelter in place, this is where we want you to be ready. And I think as long as you're paying attention to those and understanding that a lot of work and a lot of professional aptitude goes into creating those alerts, that when we say go, it's time to go. That's where all of this training, we are going to switch away from worrying about our homes. We're going to worry about ourselves, and we're going to be the first ones down the hill. And we're going to be at the front of the charge, not at the back of the charge.
First one's down. That's the key to it. Very good, Larry. Thank you. Well, we've had a long night, and really thanks to all of you for sticking through all of this. But Larry, did you have some closing thoughts for all of us?
I do have a couple, and I think it's important for people to understand that, first of all, thanks Rich and company for putting this together. This is a tremendous resource. We're very lucky to have Fire Safe Marin in this community. It's really the hub of the wheel when it comes to gathering all this information and staying one step ahead of providing a great benefit to our community. So thank you very much for having me. But I want people to understand this is overwhelming. It's a lot of information. We want to break it up into little pieces and be successful at little things that are going to turn into big things. When you look down at the participants in this event, we've had between 65 and 80 people. That's less than 1% of just the population in our greater Ross area. We're roughly 40 to 50,000 people stretching from Larkspur all the way out to the coast. It's really important that we're engaging with our community and our neighbors and our friends. Make this a talking point. Make this, take away some of the stigma about talking about wildfire and talking about evacuation prep. And hey, have you signed up for Alert Marin? The last thing I'll bring up is that as much as the fire departments and agencies want to solve all these problems, we can't do it alone. We're going to do our best to provide you the most current and up-to-date scientific data and values, the best practices that we're learning every year when we go out and work on these events. But we really are relying on the community to engage those concepts together. And really, it's going to take all those micro steps are going to become that bigger solution to some of these problems. It's not going to happen in the next week, the month, or the year. I know I'm going to get a lot of calls after this saying, my neighbor has this problem, my community has this problem. There's a whole lot of things that we are working on, but it's a 10-year program. We're not going to accomplish this overnight, but certainly we're going to do everything we can to expedite some of these solutions. I speak on behalf of all the fire agencies and their prevention staffs, their fire marshals, deputy fire marshals, and battalion chiefs that want to welcome anybody that wants to reach out with questions. We are here to be a primary source. If you can't find it on Fire Safe Marin or you want something specific to your agency, reach out, make that connection. I ask that you please be patient. A lot of times during the summer times, we're out defending our communities or working with others in the community. Pardon me. So give us a couple days to get back. Oftentimes email is the best way to approach those questions because oftentimes we're answering those at 10 or 11 o'clock at night or on a Saturday or Sunday. So I thank everybody for participating. We're really proud of this community and we look forward to all the successes. Hopefully we can build off of this.
Thanks, Larry. That's a great summation and really good points to leave everybody with. I really want to thank you for making the time to do this. I really appreciate it. I want to thank Todd too. I know we lost him, but we also got a pretty good dose of Todd throughout the videos there. So we kind of know where he thinks, and I hope he enjoys his vacation, and well-deserved, in Montana. We're going to welcome him back soon. And then last of all, before I get to this, I also want to thank some of the folks at Fire Safe Marin behind the scenes who put all this together. Jen Ghana, Meg McCabe, Aaron Harris, Chikara Motomura, and so forth that have really made all this possible. It was a lot of work to create this. Dominic Randolph, probably forgot somebody at this point, but thanks to all of you. And then last of all, once again, really want to thank all the audience for coming. This is kind of a long haul to go through all this, but I see almost all of you stuck till the very end, and we really do appreciate that. And we're here at Fire Safe Marin and look forward to hearing from you, any follow-up questions, and let's all have a safe summer. Thanks very much to everyone. Good night and have a good weekend.